This is going to be part presentation, but I would really like to invite us to kind of create more of a collective experience together. And the goal of that is to kind of try to create more of a sense of belonging, both internally and externally. And how can we have healing if we don't have belonging? And so I'd love to throw out how I do confidentiality in my personal life and in my professional practice, which is pretty basic. I just try not to give identifying information about other people's stories. Their stories might be relevant to me or to clients or to friends, and so stories are, very important. They've been important throughout the history of language and humanity, and so it's really important to use these stories to help teach and be role models. And so I'm wondering if we could all agree not to use identifying information about people when we leave here. So whatever's shared, if you share something and you share your name and maybe there's emotion there or whatever, that you know that other people aren't going to be saying, oh, this person's name, and linking identifying information back to you. Thumbs up or hands up if you feel good with that. Great, thank you. And we're kind of going to do like a question and answer style rather than just do a presentation. How many people here feel like they are well versed in IFS? Okay, great. How many people have some knowledge of internal family systems? Awesome, great. So
how many are clueless?
Ooh, good question. Great.
All right.
Awesome. Great. Do you want to take over for a little bit?
Sure. Yeah?
Yeah.
First of all, I agree with everything you said. And so Michael Crespi here. Trained in so many trauma therapies and coming from also a basis of transpersonal and metaphysical experiences, shamanic worlds. That's where that external, internal world grabbed Michael and said, pay attention, there's things in this life you need to do, and sort of shook me awake into my own, big leap into this journey. And along that journey, when I discovered IFS, it was such a game changer of efficacy and a total paradigm shift on how to work with people. It is so much more than another modality. In fact, when people refer to it as a modality, I kind of go, it's a lot more than a modality. It really, there's this idea of I, it, and this modality takes us into I, thou. It's a really very engaging with a deeper sense of what it means to be human and beyond. So that's that for now. And any questions so far? Good.
I could go into, I put up a little something there, and I can go into identity development because I want to share some about my identity. And so the way that I think of my identity is at the core, or the way that I feel my identity actually is at the core, is this self that doesn't have a gender and doesn't have an identity to it, really. Let me look at my notes because I'm losing a little bit of my focus. Nothing to protect. The self here, for me, there's nothing to protect. It's open, it's connected. And then out from that, and if I do circles, out from that, in just like a developmental stage, so, at like 2 to 5, let's say, there's a sense of being gender fluid. I didn't really know what gender was. It was playful, and so I got to experiment with different types of gender. And so for me, when I move out from self, I hit a part of me that's gender fluid and playful and doesn't really want to identify with any particular gender. And then when I move out from that, I kind of begin to hit being cisgendered and and heterosexual, and so then there's these identities along with that. And then out from that are, this kind of realm of a connection with community, and what becomes self and other is a little harder to define. But I would say this realm here of cisgendered, heterosexual, has really been conditioned into me. And in this realm here, there's more fluidity and playfulness. And then the self is this really beautiful way of connecting, but it's not really how I live as I move through the day-to-day. And so the parts really start to form, the parts of self start forming anywhere outside of self. And so what are parts of self? Any of us that have been indecisive, where we want to do one thing or another thing, we can't decide. Most likely there are different parts of us at play at the basis of that. And so what makes IFS really brilliant is it gives this map of multiple different roles that parts play. And so there's protectors, and there's two forms of protectors, and the protectors are managers and firefighters. And the managers are kind of how we live our day-to-day life. And they're controlling, purposeful, proactive, and future-oriented. And so our managers are like the workaholic or the taskmaster. But managers want to keep us safe by thinking about the future and preparing for it. And so what are they protecting when I call them protectors? They're protecting exiles. And so these are the wounded parts of us that usually form, in adolescence and early childhood. And so we've got the managers and then the firefighters, which firefighters are another class of protector, but they are present moment focused, and they're spontaneous and impulsive and reactive. And so they are trying to keep the strong emotions or beliefs of exiled parts of us from emerging. And so exiles might have beliefs, I'm worthless, and that can come from a single experience in childhood. Or vulnerability isn't safe. And so these exiles are what we're really wanting to heal. And so getting back to the brilliance of IFS is it says that the managers, they don't really need healing. Their role that they're playing is based on trying to protect the exile. And so when you've messed around in your life trying to fix the workaholic and not really getting anywhere, it's because underneath that workaholic is some buried burden that workaholic is trying to protect you from. And so IFS teaches us to get permission to get beyond the workaholism and find out what this burden is that you've been carrying and release that burden. And so that can happen emotionally. I've been with clients where they were carrying a burden that their dad carried from bombing people in World War II. And it wasn't until we were doing this internal family systems work, he watched himself be back in Germany in 1948. So he was essentially being his dad and was grieving that he'd bombed this place. And he didn't know that he was carrying this transgenerational trauma. He's 65. And he grieved that, and he noticed in that process there was this lightening somatically in his chest on the left side of his body. And so the other thing to bring up is that these parts of us, they live in us psychologically and somatically. And so IFS really is an embodied practice, and we're really trying to get to know this system of parts. And so I like this idea that most of us are kind of in the town hall meeting where everybody's raising their voice and trying to get attention. And what the self helps us do is it says, hang on, I'm going to get to each one of you individually. And hey, if you can quiet down in the back there, just for a little bit, we will get to you. And we're going to start with this person over here. And we get to know that. And so what happens in internal family systems is the parts get to know the self and the parts get to know each other. And so it is really a therapy about being in relationship. And the beauty of that is that it spills over to how we're in relationship with the rest of the world. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, let the games begin.
Yeah.
Is the self the same for everybody?
Nice. So theoretically, yes, self fits in with Atman or with non-dual traditions of this kind of self-absolute that's undifferentiated and whole. And every part of us has self in it as well. And so most of us, I think, we're not just being, an enlightened self. Self is emerging in and through us. And so it's kind of like, I think of self as like the sun, and all of us are stained glassed windows, or parts of us are stained glass. And so self emerges through that, and it brings color to it. It changes it some. Yeah.
Self also has, there's particular qualities to it. So you might wonder, how do I discern if I'm in self or in the strategy of a part? Really important to know that a part is not what it does. Has anybody ever had an argument with themselves? That's a silly question.
I'm going to just write some stuff so that you guys got it up here. Well, you keep talking.
Okay, thank you. Anybody like to volunteer in just a conflict? Yeah, in the back, right behind you.
What was the conflict?
Have you ever had an argument with yourself?
Yeah, all the time. Variety of stuff. Sometimes it's, I'm leaving the house. I want to do one thing. Like I think, I can give you. I'm kind of a bit of a morning person, so I like get up and do stuff. And the second, once that momentum starts to stop or not continue to build, I get really frustrated and I have to argue with myself about, well, now we've hit this roadblock. Do we want to keep doing the 5 things that we said we were going to do, even though we've only accomplished 2? And then it's like, well, now I don't feel like it because I've lost the momentum, and I don't want to redo all that work to start getting myself started again. And sometimes I've managed to be like, no, we'll finish it. And sometimes I'm like, I just can't.
So through an IFS lens, you have a part that is really, it has a strategy of getting things done, right? And then this other part comes in with a strategy where that is in some way contrary to what its strategy is that it thinks is in your best interest. Our parts all love us dearly, and quite often they get it quite wrong on how they manifest that. So it's maybe some more illustrations on these 3 kinds of IFS parts. Anybody ever come home from work and felt like they wanted a beer just to chill out a bit? I have. And now imagine in that same, so there's a protector strategy. It's a manager. It's managing the stress. And an example of a firefighter might be if somebody gets fired from work and now they come home and their internal exile, the original wound of being rejected, abandoned, is so activated that something strong, bigger medicine has to come retroactively and put that fire out. And that's why we call it a firefighter, right? So the manager is preemptive. It's always managing the environment to contain the possibility of an exile, an original traumatic wound, being the pain of that, having a flashback experience of that, right? And then the firefighter comes in after the fire started. It got by the manager's strategy somehow, and then it does something pretty significant to put the fire out. It doesn't care about consequences. Just like if your house is on fire, firemen come in, they don't care about the carpet, they don't care about smashing a hole in the roof, they're just going to get the job done. Without any personal story, anybody ever experience a firefighter? Yeah. Some examples of that might be any kind of addictive behavior that goes more than an occasional beer or something, but really, I got to use this to put out this stress I'm having. Any questions so far? Thoughts? Yeah.
I could touch a little on polarization, because polarization is something that we're experiencing right now in our country and globally in a lot of ways. And polarization is something that happens internally as well. And polarization can kind of be elusive in the sense that we don't necessarily always see what we're polarized against. And so usually what happens is the expressed parts of us go unnoticed actually, eventually, and the unexpressed parts of us are the ones that hijack the system. And so I'll give a personal example. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and my wife and I were trying to get back to an earlier bedtime schedule. And I'd come from doing a day-long, giving a day-long training, and she'd gone out to a play with my 5-year-old, and the bedtime was slipping, getting later and later. And I got a part of me that got really irate, like super angry. It kept on seeing each little slip she did as her breaking our agreement, not trying to, get to this place that we had wanted to be at. And what I was able to do as I unblended, so when you were irate or when we're seduced, when we're having strong emotion, we usually end up blended with a part of us. And when we're blended, we don't have much choice. We become reactionary. And so I was feeling all of this reaction, and I started trying to find out what was important to that part. And so there's a good statement here that, let's see, parts, where did I put it down? Oh yeah, so our job is not to find out who's right in the polarization, but to find out what they are afraid would happen if they stopped doing what they were doing. And so I started asking this part, why was it doing what it was doing? And it turned out I had a young part of me that was exuberant and had joy and had gotten shamed and yelled at by my dad. And so I had this trapped joy. This exiled part of me had learned it couldn't express joy. And what happened is this angry part of me learned to not like children and not like being controlled by other people, because it was reacting, it had learned what my dad had told the exiled part of me. Does that make sense?
I'm confused.
So, okay. Let's see if I can map this out a little bit. So, I'm going to erase this. So I had a reactive, angry part. Oops, I'm dyslexic. And not so good at spelling. Angry part, okay. So I had a reactive, angry part. And when I went with what it was telling me, which was to, go talk to my wife, get her to get back on the, bedtime schedule, I wasn't going to get anywhere. Instead, I started asking it, why is it acting that way? And I found out that it was protecting a part of me that had been told that had been shamed for being joyful, exuberant. Like I came in as a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old and got, yelled at by my dad.
Because you were exuberant.
Because I was exuberant. Yep. And so then a part of me formed that said children shouldn't dominate the space. And it also formed and said, I don't ever want to be controlled by other people. And so what I was missing in this polarization also, which I eventually found, was there was another part of me that always wants, I'm a therapist. I'm always being controlled by people's emotions in a way. And so, what I found is there's another part of me that's living the day-to-day that always wants to care about someone else's emotion, always wants to make a decision. And that part of me is also protecting the exiled part of me that has the trapped joy. And so they're both trying to protect this exile, but they have different strategies. Is this making sense? So what really struck me is that my day-to-day way of being slowly created this polarity with this angry part of me, and then the angry part finally broke out one night, and I was able to trace it back to the exile. And the angry part was also in polarity to a considering other people part. So it always considered other. It always considers other people. And so now that they both know they're in a system trying to protect this exiled part, there's a bit more dialogue. There's a bit more space inside of my system. Do you want to add to this at all?
Of course. I think it'd be good if we actually did a little demo with somebody in the audience and just got a feeling for what this actually looks like and take it out of the,
Thanks.
the analytical understanding. Would you be willing? And we're not going to go deep. We're going to keep this just to give a basic hands-on experience of it. Let's see, a couple chairs maybe. Jake, I'm going to get these over here. I'll take that one. Want to grab that? Yeah, thanks. That's a cool umbrella, dude.
And maybe I could offer would a little guided meditation help us drop in? Or do you want to just drop in? How are you feeling?
I think we could just drop in.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to ask Lena to drop in. And you could all follow. It's very simple, the dropping in. So I'm going to initiate that by just giving very basic instructions to Lena, which is often how I'll start something. And so I'm going to give the instructions. Don't do it until I give the instructions, although I know you're quite a pro at this. So take a couple. So I'm inviting you all to do the same, right? So this is about me demonstrating here, but as I do so, you're going to experience, if you follow along, you'll experience your own internal system, okay? So it's not just watch us do this, but see what happens internally as you follow along. You could all be doing this. So, Lena, I'm going to instruct you to take a couple slow, deep breaths, and then ask which part of you needs to be worked with most. Don't do it yet. And then whatever comes in, I don't care if it's the most ridiculous thing, basketball with pink polka dots, or it makes total sense. It can be an image, a smell, a taste. And we're moving from the part that thinks of answers to that quality of us that's really intuitive. And it all of a sudden, something is present in response. So go ahead, take a couple slow, deep breaths and ask which part needs to be worked with most. And everybody just raise their hand when something pops in.
I'm seeing a television screen that's
kind of blurry with some strange colors on it. It's all blurry.
Mm. And where do you feel the locus of that in your physical or energetic body? Focus there. Usually there'll be some somatic response to this.
I'm feeling it in my chest, a tightening in my chest on my right side.
Mm-hmm. Describe what it feels like there.
It's like a pulling.
Mm-hmm. Say more about what it feels like. Not what you're thinking, but just the feeling of it.
It's a pulling and it feels a little tight
Mm-hmm.
and it feels a little overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Does that be a way to describe it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just check in and ask, do I have any parts that do not want me to connect with what I'm feeling here in my chest?
No parts are telling me not to.
Okay. And just ask again, is there even a very quiet part in the background that might have some concerns?
Maybe a little one.
Yeah.
Maybe a little one.
Bring your attention to that one. And just ask her, what is it she needs you to know? Whatever comes in.
And it's going to be okay.
Is it going to be okay? Is that what she's saying?
Yeah, she's asking me.
Is it going to be okay? Can you see an image of her?
I do.
Yeah. What does she look like?
She's not very happy, but she's about 3.
Mm.
She's about 3.
What's she doing?
She's playing with a lot of other kids.
Yeah. What does she want you to know?
They're fighting with her over toys.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be okay.
And it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The party is saying it's going to be okay. Is that the same as the little girl? Is
No.
that no? So there's a protective part coming in, right there, and trying to shield whatever the 3-year-old's experience is from that worry that it's not going to be okay. Ask that protective part, is that accurate or is it different?
That's accurate.
Okay. So, thank you, Lena. That's as far as we're going to go with it. And maybe other people are still in their journey here. I don't know, but yeah. Do you want to flesh out a bit about what happened there?
Well, I'm curious to hear what other people are noticing either internally in their own system as they went inward, or, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank for doing that, and that requires some courage and yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't see, like, for me, thank you, Lena, that was wonderful. I didn't see mine as like a vision. Like, you asked me what the first thing that came to my mind, and it was like, it was a word. It was something that I think I lack in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just, is it supposed to be a word? Is it supposed to be a vision? Is it supposed to be something where I'm thinking about myself as a little child? Because that's not what happened for me.
So, Steve, it's not supposed to be anything. It's what is true is exactly what comes up. You know? As an example, I had a person I was working with, she was a lawyer, and what came up for her, and I said, this makes no sense. It was the smell of a candy. And it's like, that's nothing. She tossed it out, but I knew enough to, no, let's go with that. And it turned out that was the smell of the candy that was on the kindergarten's teacher's desk. And then that led into a whole world. So a word for sure can be, whatever it is a trailhead. It's the beginning of where you start this hike, not knowing where it's going to go, but trusting that it's going to take you exactly where it needs to take you. So I don't do treatment plans. I don't do goals and objectives for those that know that language, because that would be my agenda. And in this world, there is an intrinsic wisdom here that knows exactly where to take us under the right guidance from someone like me or Daniel. Yeah.
Does it start from symbolism though? Because they're very symbolic. In my thing, the first thing that came to mind was confidence. That's confidence, but that's not symbol. That's not me being a child or me seeing a rapper or some type of sensory experience. So it's like, is that just the start of my journey is different than a sensory experience for whatever reason?
I would guess that word confidence that came up will end up leading to a sensory experience.
Yeah, it's just the reverse of it. Okay.
Well, and I was just playing around with somebody I was having lunch with yesterday. They were interested, and the word came up, love. And so one might think, oh, they're feeling love. No, it was actually what was blocking love, right? And really inhibiting it. And then we just went a little further down the road to understand that.
So I think Steve's questions bring up to me the question of how can we use IFS on ourselves? It's great to have a practitioner. It's actually, I would say, necessary at some point, because it's really difficult to navigate the internal world and ask yourself questions at the same time. And with practice, one can become better at creating more space internally. Yeah, I'm wondering if there are other questions or comments, I guess.
Did anybody? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the practice of IFS is sort of starting with what is presented, what comes up, and just following that down a path.
That's right.
So in some ways, then psychedelic journey is that path, and you're taking a look at the symbolism and the meanings of what you envision on a journey and plugging it into the parts world.
I think, yes, and at the same time, I would say I think it's really good to start with somebody really skilled with this, and so that they can also teach you how to do it on your own, because it's simple, but it's not easy, and there's so many nuances. But and so moving it into the psychedelic realm, yeah, that's opening up. There's a lot to say around that, and that's a big piece about why we're here. Psychedelic realm, a lot of parts are going to come up, a lot of potentially, well, I'm going to just blow my cover here a little bit, which is I see IFS as 4 pillars of IFS. One being this parts work we talk about, one being the reality that the ancestors are alive in an alternate reality right here. It's not just epigenetics, it is also a direct experience and in communication with them. And they too are carrying their burdens and also their heirlooms. And so when we're going back to psychedelics, so much can come in, right? Or not, I would say it doesn't come in. I would say it's always here. It's us that comes in, right? We're not calling things in, we're calling ourselves into a reality that's there. And the medicines can facilitate sort of removing that veil. And so...
It's like the medicine is helping us to drop in.
Yeah. To see what otherwise our ego state doesn't see. And third pillar would be the reality of guides, ethereal beings, and entities that have negative intent. Some would call it spirit possession. And it's real. And 10 years ago, I would have said bullshit, but now I know the truth and reality of it. And then, so there's working with that. And and then maybe another is the reality of past lives and how a lot of what we do can be also like puppets on the strings of all these things. And so making this conscious, and certainly starting with parts and making parts conscious, that dynamic that Daniel articulated so well there on the board. And then it continues. So in a psychedelic journey, there's so much that one is opening themselves up to. And the medicine is that journey. So it wants somebody really skilled on how to prepare and then how to work with it. And for those who saw your presentation just before, it was extraordinary on helping understand deeper depths of that.
Could I add one thing about that?
Please.
Piggyback off that comment I made about the psycholytic versus the psychedelic dose.
Yeah.
When in ketamine work, actually, if we want to work on parts, it's sometimes better to do a lower dose than psycholytic. Because that just creates enough spaciousness for people to then observe their inner landscape and pay attention to it. So like if we're sitting doing parts work and we're not an inducible person, like we can't go into hypnosis easily, or that like we can't emerge into things easily. Our imaginations will shut off. Sometimes doing parts work is like tricky unless you have a super skilled facilitator. But if you give too much a psychedelic dose, it's too much. Too much information comes on, and it's just like, and there's overwhelming, and there are parts that can arise that saying like, this is too much, I don't want this right now. So the small dosing can sometimes just loosen up and make things safe enough for parts to arise.
And thank you, that's exactly right.
And in fact, I've seen people that have no experience on journey doses of ketamine. They don't experience anything. And then they go to a lower psycholytic dose and they start experiencing something. And so they've got a protector that's like, you're not taking me into this altered state of consciousness.
So when I was working with Lena a moment ago, had her go in and are there any parts that don't want you to connect with this feeling? The immediate response was, everybody's on board, it's okay. And then I've learned through experience, maybe not true, and probably more times than not, asking again, is there even a quieter voice in the background? And yes, there was. And if I hadn't known to ask that question, then we would have just been going la, 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 and missed really what was underneath. So in psychedelic dosing, I guess, it's a big journey, what's being revealed, and all kinds of things can come up. And I think also, Selma, what we were also potentially alluding to, there can be something called backlash. And this is why so much preparation is important to work with parts prior to dosing, so that you don't enter it with parts that their strategy, they're wedded to their strategy. They've been doing it your whole life, maybe for generations, and now you're going to take something that's going to basically push them aside like they don't matter. And with this, I'll go with the story I came up with in myself a while back, which is, imagine you're walking through the woods, and you come across a baby bear, and the bear has a broken arm, and it's, moaning there. And what happens if you just go right to that baby bear to help it, and there's Mama Bear 20 feet over there? It's going to be a pretty lousy story. So if we see Mama Bear as the wound, the exile, the trauma, and we go right to it without attending to the protector, Mama Bear, whose job has been all these years to do what she does, maybe drinking, maybe sex, it may be drugs, it may be, millions of things, right? But if we don't get her permission before we go into the medicine journey, and the medicine journey just overrides her protective strategy, there can be backlash, right? In other words, she's going to come back at you afterwards. I had that happen with a couple I was working with. We were working with, his parts kept him avoiding intimacy. Her parts were really reaching out to intimacy, and we're working with some parts. And unbeknownst to me, he was doing an ayahuasca journey, then an iboga journey, and not an iboga, frog. That one. Yeah. And so he comes in by himself the next time, and he's like, wow, I was so full of love. Everything was wonderful. It was great. I mean, all those intimacy questions were gone. And then, comes back the next week with his wife, and she was crying that he had turned into this stone of not wanting to leave, nothing to do with it, and just emotionally shut down. So that's what a backlash can look like. And also to say, this can work plenty well, plenty of times, but also, they can be a landmine. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm curious if other people we're talking about psychedelics, I'm curious if other people have either questions around psychedelics and IFS, how to utilize it, or a personal experience that they'd like us to put more attention on.
You just mentioned that you said that it would be nice to do it in the care. You should get care, under a skilled practitioner. But you started that sentence by saying you can start doing IFS by yourself. And so just telling us a little bit more about that. Like I would love to, eventually get into care, but it's something that I would want to learn and experience a little bit myself and learn a little bit more about who I am. That in this, I don't want to call it a modality, but in this system that would, help me be better for care.
Great. So I think noticing when we're blended. So blended is when we're having a strong emotional response or a psychological response where we're looping to some degree is basically when we're blended. And so that, intense anger, lust, betrayal, avoidance is also blending with a part. And so noticing you're blended is the beginning of potentially unblending. And so the U-turn is this really important thing. If you'll notice, most of our parts are saying either they're criticizing us or they're criticizing others. And so they're saying things about others, whether or not it's internal or external. And so what we really need to do is get the U-turn. And that U-turn is to begin to ask that part, what's important about this strategy? What is it what's it trying to get done through this shaming, blaming, disavow? And so this U-turn is incredibly important. Learning how to connect with oneself and have a way to regulate, so breath work, de-escalation techniques. Here's where other theories come in, like polyvagal theory and the autonomic nervous system. And so there's basics there that on our out breath, we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is used to slow us down. And on our in-breath, we activate our sympathetic nervous system, which energizes us. And so when there's a breath where you do 2 short in-breaths and then a long exhale. And that long exhale is going to create more emphasis on the parasympathetic nervous system and start to slow you down. And what I find incredibly interesting about this is I believe that prayer before eating was a way to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And so our ancestors intuitively knew that if they kept moving and didn't slow down, they weren't actually going to digest their food as well. And so taking a moment in prayer, meaning taking a moment to slow down, to breathe slower, to activate your parasympathetic nervous system is going to put you into rest and digest. Then you'll start consuming food and you'll actually metabolize that food to a much higher degree.
Daniel, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. And there's a caveat in that when we're doing mindfulness practices, meditation, that it can actually be trying to shut down, using a protective strategy, shut down the process of of engaging in exile. So, people have, I like to say to my clients, I want to work myself out of a job. I don't want somebody to be needing to turn to something as a Band-Aid to keep regulating the system. Because a system, with exceptions, a system that's, what's the role of anxiety? Anybody ever have anxiety? I get a yes every time. What is anxiety? So in our culture, we're taught that anxiety is something we want to get rid of. It feels horrible. And there's a whole, pharmaceutical world that makes billions of dollars on getting rid of anxiety. And there's a whole meditation and yoga world that makes millions of dollars on getting rid of anxiety. And so what is anxiety? I see anxiety as a really important message to us from our parts that are desperate to be seen and heard and witnessed, and somebody help me. So imagine it as a smoke alarm in your house is going off, right? That's what our parts are, like the smoke alarms. And what does so many of these things try to do is pull the battery out of the smoke alarm rather than finding out where the smoke is coming from or if there's a risk. So IFS fundamentally is about using what Daniel's bringing up when it's necessary in to answer your question, Steve, but also not to use it as the solution. The solution is really about what this IFS concept is, finding out what we did with Lena, and if that was to be continued, we go in and we would find an exile there that was some young wound, and it needs to be witnessed. So that's another thing. It's everything Daniel has said, but even before asking a questions that want to understand it, just to be witnessing it. And even just witnessing it will help that part. You'll just feel your body go a lot, from an 8 of agitation down to a 3. So these are ways you can definitely practice on your own. There's a million YouTube videos out there. There's so much access to practicing on your own and seeing demos done on the screen to help you do that. Yeah, hi.
I'm curious if IFS, this framework, could, or maybe in your opinion, might be good to use for dream interpretation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, great question. Yeah. Well, I imagine many of us have had those dreams that are just like the dream, and so much information comes through in that dream, right? You can't make this stuff up. And so it's in, what is it? And so that's more moving into the transpersonal potential of that, guides that speak through our dreams, and then parts that speak through our dreams. Sometimes there are other parts that keep...
Let's slow that down a little bit, because you just said dreams could be guides speaking to us. They could be parts speaking to us.
Right.
And so learning to differentiate that, there was a classic belief that every thing you experience in the dream is a part of yourself. I don't honestly think that that's true. I think it can be guides. I think sometimes, family members that are deceased will show up in dreams. That's a way to say it's a guide. And what are they trying to teach you or offer you about yourself?
Thank you for that. And so on the, when it's a part, example of a client who is having panic attacks. And what is a panic attack? Defined very differently in this work than in the medical model of panic attacks. So we did a little work around that, discovered a very young child that was needing to be witnessed. The panic attack was really the smoke alarm going off rather than something you want to do all these skills to get rid of, but rather you want to witness. So in that case, she was also unable to, these panic attacks would wake her up in her sleep. And so she was really sleeping horribly. So I suggested that when she goes to sleep that night, and if that starts to come up, that she ask it, who are you? What do you need? I'm here for you. I love you. And then this 3-year-old, or however old is young, just needed to be cuddled and held. No panic attack.
That's the U-turn.
That could be a U-turn, right, exactly. And so the client was able to give that child, that inner child who's real, this isn't just an imagination, was able to give her something that helped her. She was really asking to be held. And then she was able to sleep. And when it did come up again, it's the same process. Hi.
So what I'm hearing with this conversation is ongoing. Like they are not going away. We just say they're part of our wholeness, even.
Yeah.
We don't want to exile more parts.
And we never exile. That's great. Glad you were. So if you take the W out of the word wholeness, what do you get? You get holy, holiness, right? So this is a really holy process. And our parts, we don't get rid of our parts. We help the parts, the protectors and the firefighters, see the value of us getting access to the wound, to the exiled ones, so that we
Or
can
the
help it.
self getting access. When you say us,
Yeah, yes,
so
that works. Yeah.
the
that's good.
self is getting access to the wounded exile. And since the self is compassionate, calm, loving, the exile gets to have a different experience. It unburdens. And then the protectors all of a sudden don't have to do their job anymore, because their job, my protector that was getting angry, doesn't have to protect the trapped joy. That part of me can now express joy. And it turns out that the protector wants to do something else. What does it want to do now? The job will change. The part we don't get rid of. So there's some good quotes here that every part of our personality that we do not love will become hostile to us. And that which we exile inside of us, we will hate and exile outside of us.
Did that address your question? Yeah. Anybody here ever seen a murmuration of starlings? Yeah? And that's when, tens of thousands of birds all doing incredible acrobats. And it's like, I use that as a metaphor for this work. It's, how can they, flying at 50 miles an hour, wingtip to wingtip, not be crashing into each other as they do all these extraordinary moves? So imagine that what keeps that intrinsic oneness is self, right? It's our internal source, I often call it. And so there's a perfection. It's all happening. And then let's just say outside of that, there's the child. And the child experiences something maybe on the surface as simple as she spills the milk off the table, and mother's or father's in a pretty uptight mood, hijacked by their own parts, screams at the child, and then the child has to do something to get back on good terms with mom or dad. Imagine that in the murmuration, that is one of the protective parts is a bird, and it leaves the flock to go attend to the little one with some strategy that might look like, Mommy, I'll pick it up, I'll clean it, just trying to be a pleaser. And if that is unattended to and, continues to happen in different ways through her life, that part strategy can look like a people pleaser as an adult, right? Makes sense? So as we go through our lives, all these protective parts, these birds, are peeling off the flock until the flock itself starts to lose its resonance. And it's, and we're not living this full life of potential that is illustrated by the murmuration. So as we do this work, the parts that have done their jobs, we help those parts see that they don't need to do that job. We help that exile heal its trauma. And then that bird, that part, returns back to the flock we give it a new role to support our highest self-actualization. And so, how did that fly for a fly? No pun intended. Yeah, Steve.
The parts change then. The parts change. They're not.
Their strategies change.
The strategies of
The part is not what it does.
The part is not what it does.
Right. So yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, feedback?
is it still trying to protect us though? Like the angry bit that you had, Daniel, in your story, like that was some type of protection that was helping you, that helped you at some point. It's not serving you right now, but at some point again, to survive, that maybe you might need to, access that part again, or we want to go in a different direction.
That part will likely not be, because that part is actually connected to a part that's lost in the past. And so the starlings are moving by the self. And so if a threat comes in, they move away from the threat altogether. It's not one part taking off and doing the strategy it did. And so quite likely we'll respond to protecting ourselves very different, but we will respond. And the fact that we've already learned how to have a relationship inside of ourselves is going to help us have a better response outside of ourselves.
That's exactly the key right there. So, what was I going to say? The self, we need anger. There's times when anger is really important to have, as a lot of these qualities are. The discernment is that anger self-led, or is it coming from a reactive part, right? If somebody's coming at me with a knife, I'm going to do everything I can to stop them. But after I stop him, assuming I did, I'm not going to kick his head into the curb. I'm going to do what I need to do, but from a self-led place of those qualities of self. And that's an ideal. So this is a compass direction. I don't know that anybody's ever totally reached enlightenment with this. It's a journey. Yeah.
A lot of it sounds a lot like just tapping into your inner child and as an adult and being the parent or right
Totally reparenting.
of what you didn't get when you were a child, and practicing kindness and gratitude and self-love to end up nurturing that hurting part within yourself.
Yeah.
It's not to get rid of it, but it's to acknowledge and be aware that it is there, and that you can go back and nurture the inner child that was hurt.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anybody ever been in a relationship where either you or the other person started to sabotage a relationship? Yeah. So that's very detrimental to relationship. Extrapolate that out to how we treat our earth, right? In that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so that is very much about the harm done that we're puppets on the strings of. I mean, I know in relationships I've said, God, where did that come from, Michael? Who the hell said that? And I said it, but it was like, it hijacked. That's what it means. And so why do this work? So that we can actually be in a state that it comes from self-capacity, doing the U-turns, and being able to be present to a deeper sense of who we are as true, whole, holy people. Yeah. And what we can then deliver our gifts into this life that we are so gifted to have.
Is there a universality of the different parts? Are they archetypes? Do all human beings have limited parts, or is it all individual?
How many parts do we got? Sort of. Often asked, and I don't know that anybody has an answer to that. The guru of this work, Richard Schwartz, would say, who knows, but lots. But I would say that if you can work with, the 6 major parts in your life that interrupt your flow, you've come a long way. Is this work ever done? Maybe not, but let's work with those that are really obstacles. Another metaphor I like to use, imagine we're each perfectly tuned airplanes on the runway. We are mean machines. We are fine. It's the runway that has the obstacles. And so we don't want to get rid of the obstacles. We want to transmute them And the goal isn't to heal. The goal is for that plane to take off and deliver our gifts into this life. That's the real goal. So if you get through 6 or whatever your thing is, but people have varying degrees of how many obstacles are on their runway. Yeah.
I have noticed in clients that some clients appear to have a lot more parts and blend more easily with those parts, and other clients seem to have less parts, and there's a simpler process
There's
there.
happy parts and there's parts in conflict and
Yes, and I mean, even if we look at neurodivergence and, like I've got dyslexia and ADD, and I think neurodivergence can allow certain parts to form that might be different from someone who's more neurotypical, and in ways that can be a real gift. I think there's parts of my neurological makeup that are actually simpler. And so they see things in simplified ways, which actually I think gives me a deeper connection to self because it's not over-intellectualized for those parts of me.
So would you say that, and that's something that came up for me when I was talking to myself, that neurodivergence can be part of how protectors play out in a way to regulate the system?
That's beautiful, yeah. I think you're totally right that neurodivergence could very much be a parts playing a role in that way, yeah, to regulate the system.
You bring up Marina. That's really a big subject too. How much physical ailments or can be utilized by a part for its own protective strategy. Neurodivergent. In my level 1 training, the first weekend, I had this part that I thought I was ADD, and discovered that this was a part that was actually using the so-called characteristics of ADD as a protective strategy. So it's not all about doing the meds to do with that, and but rather let's look at the parts that are causing, or they can be causing and also amplifying for their own strategy, right? How does that land on you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had clients with somatic symptoms, like migraines, that with group psilocybin work and IFS work, they were able to contact grief and an exile from the death of their parent that they hadn't contacted for 10 years. And once they processed that, the migraines were gone.
Exactly. I had a client, a couple, who they were both in their early 40s. She'd been trying to conceive all this time, had gone to the doctors to do artificial work. Turns out she was a really bad candidate for harvesting her eggs, et cetera, et cetera. And so we went in, and she'd given me sort of a tip-off, which was she had always had this background concern, that fear of a child being born disabled. So when we went into the deeper realms of this work, discovered an ancestor, don't know how many hundreds of years ago, but it was born, and we were in direct conversation with it, like I'm talking to you and vice versa, how it had been born into a culture where it was pure tragedy to try to live so disabled in that world. And so we did the unburdening, not just of the client, but of the client's ancestor. We did all this. She conceived 2 weeks later. And that's a real story that happened a year ago, right? And
so I'd like to touch on psychedelics some more, because
please, go for it.
IFS work becomes incredibly psychedelic, incredibly shamanistic, not because it's trying to be any of those things, but it turns out that our internal world offers us those experiences as real. And I want to highlight the risks, I think, of psychedelics, is that we can blend with a firefighter. We can blend with certain parts of us and when we're on psychedelics, and that can create paranoia, that can create a strengthening of an attachment to a part versus a dialogue with that part. And so more and more, I become more and more interested on lower psycholytic doses where I can actually get to know my internal world rather than the classic, hero's journey dose. And an admonition that if you're doing hero's journey doses is to really create a really strong container, both externally with certain boundaries. We could go over all that. We're not going to right now, but also spiritually, because what does spiritual mean? It means invisible. And what is IFS doing? It's accessing our invisible internal domains. And so we get to see that guides and entities are things that people experience. I don't have to call them real or unreal in order to see that people are experiencing them, and that when they're unburdened from that, their life has a much higher degree of freedom in it.
Wow, that was great. Yeah. Making the invisible visible, whether it's parts or entities or guides or however you want to frame it.
So I'm curious, I know we're nearing the end. I did put up a little guided meditation to kind of foster a sense of belonging, which I would enjoy offering, but I'm also open to answer more questions or, yeah.
We can also stay, it's into lunchtime?
About 5 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm saying that it follows lunchtime. If anybody wants to stay around and continue, we're willing to, right? Meditation or?
Are people interested in a meditation? Okay,
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. So, an invitation to actually wake up your body a little bit. So, do a little bit of stretching. Wake up. And what are you doing? You're waking up your awareness to this body, this vessel that's been carrying you. And so you're stretching, you're waking up the connective tissues, the fascia, the skeletal structure. And when you feel like you've woken it up and you are willing to come to a posture, whether or not that's sitting or standing or lying down, where you can go inward, an invitation to find a posture where you are willing to go inward. And as you sit down or stand up, however you do, an invitation to allow your gaze to soften and to allow your breath to deepen. And during this whole meditation, I might invite you to do an in-breath or an out-breath, but I invite you to go at your own rate. And so you're slowing down. And as you breathe in, invitation to just feel your intercostal muscles expanding, your lungs expanding. And when you reach the top of that, to hold that breath for just a second and then to allow a nice full exhale, allowing yourself to let go of any CO2 and other waste byproducts. And as you go inward, I invite you to ask your parts permission to go inward, just to check in with them. And as you soften your gaze or close your eyes, if you see with your inner eye, that's okay. And if you do not see with your inner eye, that's also okay. You can't do this wrong. And so now I invite you to take a slightly deeper inhale, and as you breathe in, imagine a molecule of oxygen coming from the plants and trees, the algae in the ocean, the environment around us. This is the more than human world that sustains life on the planet. And as you breathe in, you're breathing in this oxygen from the more than human beings that are sustaining life. And then on exhale, I invite you to exhale out, knowing you are letting go of carbon dioxide and other waste byproducts, and that's going out to the plants and algae and trees, and they want your CO2, they want your waste byproducts. And so just inviting yourself and your parts to let go of anything they've been carrying that they really are ready to let go of. And so again, as you breathe in, imagine a molecule of oxygen coming from the trees, entering your lungs, moving into your alveoli, through your alveoli, into your bloodstream, and into your cellular tissue, bringing life, energy, vitality, and then invite some of that to go to any parts that have just been longing for nourishment. And then on exhale, allow these parts again just to let go of anything they're ready to let go of. And as you breathe at your own rate, breathing more deeply, more fully, an invitation to feel your connection to this more than human world, feeling interconnected to the natural environment that we are a part of and filled with numerous life-giving, more than human beings. And that this planet is filled with species and an interconnected web that you and I are all a part of. And so as you breathe more deeply, noticing you are a part of this greater whole, you're enough, just the way you are. And to imagine for a moment, as you're enough, that you're also a campfire, you're a flame flickering, coals glowing. Feel your center connected, warm, fulfilled. Take a few breaths here, just feeling the warmth of self, glowing, warm. And then I invite you to look out at self, to all these parts and people that come to the campfire for warmth. And maybe you'll notice some up close, some in the shadows, just an invitation to invite all your parts to be warm around the fire, to get as close or as far as they want. That there's nothing you need to do right now except for to be with the warmth of the fire and with all these parts. And to thank them for showing up, to thank them for being here, and to invite them to actually look around the campfire and notice what other parts are here that maybe they've forgotten about or never knew were here. And then invite yourself to take a few more deeper inhales, maybe together as a group, meaning your internal group, breathing in one big full breath and then a nice long exhale, breathing out. And then whenever you feel ready, I invite you to ask your parts to go to wherever they feel safe, wherever they feel willing to wait until you return with this presence of self. To ask them to get to a safe place and then to connect with this center of self. And as you connect with this center of self, to also slowly open your eyes and connect with the room, connect with this image of the more than human beings, or this feeling of being connected to the more than human beings. And I invite you to just leave the space and stay connected to this inner sense of self and see if it can help direct you in your day, or if you can connect with it for any choices or decisions that come your way today. And Michael and I are grateful for you showing up here with your questions, your heart. Yeah, thanks. And if you have other questions that you'd like, Michael and I will be around for a little bit.